Imagine a college campus where, perfectly average guys are treated like A-list celebrities,
Right, yeah.
and then brilliant, highly attractive women are having these literal emotional breakdowns over a complete lack of dates.
It sounds totally made up.
It sounds like a dystopian novel, or I don't know, some bizarre social experiment, but it isn't. It is a mathematical reality happening right now, and it's driven by this demographic anomaly that most of us don't even realize we're living inside of.
Most people have no clue.
Exactly, because usually when you hear people complaining about modern romance, it follows this really predictable script. We blame dating apps for ruining our attention span.
Oh, sure, yeah. Tinder ruined everything.
Right. Or we talk about a decline in traditional morals. Or
Right.
we just throw our hands up and say, well, everyone just has a fear of commitment these days.
Which is such an easy out.
It is. But welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack a stack of fascinating research centered on a book called Dateonomics by Jon Birger, and we are going to look at the raw, undeniable math to figure out why the modern dating market feels so broken, frustrating, and completely lopsided.
Because if you just look at the cultural arguments, if you just blame the apps or changing values, you're completely missing the engine driving the entire car.
Right.
The engine here is a demographic phenomenon known as the man deficit among college graduates. It is not in your head. It is right there in the census data.
And it dictates everything.
Everything, in ways that go way beyond just, who we go out to dinner with.
Okay, let's unpack this. Across the United States, if you look at college-educated women between the ages of 22 and 29, there are about 5.5 million of them.
Huge number.
But in that exact same age bracket, there are only 4.1 million college-educated men.
Wow.
That is a massive 33% gap. I mean, we are looking at 4 women for every 3 men in that specific college-educated dating pool.
Exactly. And to really understand how this 33% gap reshapes adult behavior, you have to look at where this imbalance first takes root.
Which is college campuses.
Yes, college campuses. They essentially serve as this high-pressure, localized preview for the post-college dating market you enter into later. And the extremes at some of these schools are just genuinely wild.
The sources mention a few specific colleges that really highlight this. What does the dating market actually look like when the numbers are that skewed?
Well, let's look at Sarah Lawrence College, for example. The student body there is a staggering 75% women.
75%.
Yeah, and the anecdotes coming out of that campus are unbelievable. In the research, there's a story of one student whose roommate suffered a complete emotional breakdown after a guy dumped her.
Oh, man.
And they'd only been seeing each other for a week.
A week.
Just a week. And the reason the guy gave for ending it, he literally cited that the market was just too good for him to settle down.
That is brutal.
It is. The students there even have campus slang for it. They call it golden cock syndrome.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's this phenomenon where totally average guys suddenly experience these, like, alpha male Lothario dating lives simply because of absolute numerical scarcity. They hold all the leverage.
That is wild. But does the research show what happens when the shoe is on the other foot? Like, what if the guys are the ones in oversupply?
It does, yeah. And to prove this isn't just a universal, modern college experience everywhere, the research points to Caltech in California.
Okay, Caltech.
Caltech's student body is 59% male, and the culture there is a complete 180. The modern hookup culture practically doesn't exist.
Wait, really?
Really?
Yeah.
Instead, students pair off into long-term monogamous relationships very quickly.
Like immediately.
Yeah, you have stories of guys in the dorms waking up at the crack of dawn to cook handmade pancakes for the women on Valentine's Day.
Right.
They have to put in maximum effort just to compete.
I gotta push back a little here, though. I mean, you hear these stories about Sarah Lawrence, and it's easy to think, isn't this just a case of kids going wild when they leave home for the first time?
Right, the newly found freedom.
Exactly. If you give a 19-year-old complete freedom in a dorm room, they're gonna go crazy. To me, it feels a bit like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Okay.
Like you're gonna gorge yourself on crab legs and dessert, regardless of how good your table manners usually are at home. And more importantly, why is this happening now?
That's the real question.
Right. Human biology hasn't changed in 50 years, so why is this college gap suddenly causing a crisis today?
It's a great analogy, the buffet. But you really have to ask, why did the buffet suddenly open up for business?
Ah, okay.
That buffet only exists because of a massive demographic shift that's been quietly building since the 1980s.
Yeah.
Women have been attending and graduating from college at significantly higher rates than men, and that gap widens every single year.
So it's not a sudden glitch.
No, not at all. As to why it's happening now, we have to look at a convergence of, well, biological, economic, and historical factors that simply didn't exist 50 years ago.
Okay, walk me through that. How did we get to this 33% gap in the first place?
First, you have to look at the introduction of the birth control pill in the 1960s.
Right, huge cultural shift.
Massive.
Yeah.
Because before that, investing time and money into a grueling, multi-year college degree was an enormous economic risk for a woman. An unplanned pregnancy could completely derail that career path.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, the pill allowed women to effectively plan their families, which made a long-term investment in a college education economically viable. So female enrollment started climbing.
Okay, that makes historical sense. But what is keeping the men out?
That comes down to biology and economics. On the biological side, there are realities in child development. Girls generally mature faster behaviorally and intellectually in their early years.
Right, you always hear that?
And it leads to better grades in middle school and high school, which compounds into higher college readiness. Meanwhile, boys receive like 2 to 3 times as many ADHD diagnoses, which often impacts their academic trajectory early on.
And then there's the economic reality, right? For an 18-year-old guy right out of high school trying to decide if college is even worth the debt.
Precisely. If you are a 19-year-old man in places like North Dakota or Texas, you can walk onto a blue-collar oil field or into the trains and earn $60,000, $70,000, even $80,000 a year without a bachelor's degree.
That's a huge pull.
There are powerful, immediate financial incentives pulling young men away from the 4-year college track. Women simply do not have those same high-paying physical labor alternatives right out of high school, so a degree is much more crucial for their financial independence.
Well, okay.
What's fascinating here is how these resulting campus dynamics perfectly mirror evolutionary biology.
Yes. I know the book touched heavily on animal biology, which I found so strange for a book about human dating.
It seems like a stretch at first.
Yeah. Do animals really change their deep-seated mating habits just because there are more females in the pond?
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
Researchers did a fascinating study on pond cichlids. Yeah, these are fish that, in the wild, are typically strictly monogamous.
Yeah.
They pair off, they share parenting duties, it's very domestic.
Very wholesome fish.
Very wholesome.
Yeah.
But researchers took a tank and artificially increased the number of female fish.
And what happened?
The result was instantaneous. The male desertion rate more than doubled.
You're kidding.
The male fish literally abandoned their hardwired monogamous nature for a polygynous lifestyle, meaning they mated with multiple females just because the numerical ratio changed. The environment altered their fundamental behavior.
That is insane. And what happens when the males are the scarce ones in nature?
We see the exact inverse. Take a seabird called the red phalarope.
Okay.
In this species, evolutionary quirks dictate that the males are the ones who incubate the eggs. Because the males are tied up sitting on the nest, it creates a functional shortage of available males in the active mating pool.
So the females outnumber the active males.
Right. And the result? The female birds become the highly aggressive ones. They physically fight each other for access to mates, and they will even aggressively harass already bonded pairs to try and steal a male away.
So if we synthesize this, you're saying humans are basically acting out the same hardwired algorithms as fish and seabirds.
Basically, yes.
When the numbers shift, the behavior shifts. Have we ever seen this happen in recent human history, like outside of college campuses?
Yes. And we don't have to look back very far at all. Psychologist Marcia Guttentag wrote a pioneering book in 1983 called Too Many Women.
Oh, I've heard of this.
She looked at the baby boomer generation, and she found a massive demographic anomaly. Think about it. After World War II, in 1946, there was a huge, unprecedented spike in births.
The baby boom.
Right. Now, fast forward 20 years. You suddenly have an enormous crop of 20-year-old women entering the dating market.
Right, but there would also be an enormous crop of 20-year-old men, right? Because they were born at the same time.
True, but you have to factor in the cultural norm of the time. Women traditionally married men who were 3 or 4 years older than them.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. So those millions of 20-year-old women born during the boom were looking for 23 or 24-year-old men. But those men were born in 1942 or 1943, before the boom started.
So there just weren't as many of them.
Exactly. Their population cohort was significantly smaller. This mathematical mismatch created what demographers call a marriage squeeze.
So you have a massive oversupply of young women competing for a smaller pool of slightly older men. How did that generation react? Because the 1960s and 70s were obviously a time of massive social upheaval.
Guttentag noticed a fascinating pattern. Whenever women outnumber men, the culture almost automatically shifts toward what she termed sexual libertarianism.
Hmm.
Essentially, the market adapts to what the scarce resource the men wants. Casual sex becomes the norm. Men delay marriage because they have no incentive to lock themselves down. You also see an increase in feminist movements, as women realize they cannot reliably depend on marriage for long-term financial security because there simply aren't enough husbands to go around. They seek economic independence out of necessity.
That makes total sense.
Conversely, when you look at historical societies where men are in oversupply, like ancient Sparta, women gain immense social and economic leverage. In those cultures, society heavily emphasizes romance, elaborate courtship, and strict monogamy.
So what does this all mean for someone listening right now who is exhausted by the modern dating scene? It means our modern hookup culture isn't some new, unique moral failing of millennials or Gen Z.
Not at all.
It is a highly predictable biological and historical response to a numbers game.
Perfectly said.
If men are mathematically incentivized to delay marriage because they hold the leverage, how does that affect the rest of their lives? Does this biological math spill over into their wallets?
Oh, it absolutely spills over. When this biological wiring dictates our romantic behavior, it changes how we make decisions about everything, especially our finances.
Really? Like how?
There is a staggering study in the sources comparing two cities in Georgia, Columbus and Macon. They're only 100 miles apart, and they have very similar economies and demographics, with one major exception.
Which is?
Columbus has a massive oversupply of single men because it's home to the Fort Benning military base. Macon, on the other hand, has an oversupply of women.
And how did that change their spending habits?
The financial divergence is incredible. The average consumer debt in Columbus, the city with too many men, is almost $3,500 higher per person than in Macon.
Wait, 3,500 higher?
Yes. Think about the psychology there. When men find themselves in oversupply, they become highly impulsive. They know competition is fierce, so they spend heavily on credit cards to buy things that display status and wealth to compete for the scarce women.
Oh my gosh, it's exactly like peacocks. A peacock grows these massive, heavy, metabolically expensive tail feathers that make it hard to fly and easy to get eaten by predators. They do it purely to get a mate's attention. The guys in Columbus are maxing out their credit cards on lifted trucks and expensive watches to build their own metaphorical tail feathers.
It's a perfect analogy. And if you zoom out to the global picture, this economic ripple effect is even more pronounced. Look at China.
Right, they have a huge gender imbalance.
The legacy of the one-child policy, coupled with a cultural preference for sons, has resulted in a massive multi-million-person surplus of young men. Economists calculate that this intense gender imbalance has actually driven about 20% of China's recent GDP growth.
Wait, 20% of their economic growth is just driven by a dating shortage? How does that work?
Because young men are taking dangerous jobs, working grueling hours, and becoming hyper-entrepreneurial just to afford the apartments and luxury cars, they absolutely need to even be considered by a prospective wife.
That is intense.
There's a very famous quote from a Chinese bachelorette on a dating show that sums up this leverage perfectly. She told a suitor, "I would rather cry in a BMW than smile on the back of your bicycle."
Wow. That is brutal, but it shows exactly who holds all the cards in that market. But what happens on the flip side? How do women react economically when they face a shortage of men, like they do in the U.S. college-educated market?
The data shows they adopt a completely different economic defense mechanism. They focus intensely on their careers.
Makes sense.
When young women perceive a scarcity of men in their local dating pool, they intuitively realize that relying on a dual-income marriage for long-term financial security is a mathematical gamble.
So they double down on work.
Exactly. Studies show that in these markets, women literally pivot toward more lucrative, demanding career paths. They choose the briefcase over the baby as a direct response to a market where they cannot rely on a partner.
Okay, but listening to all of this, the career pivoting, the hookup culture, it all sounds very tied to secular, modern, career-driven city life. Like, of course this happens in Manhattan or San Francisco. Sure.
But surely, highly traditional, conservative, religious communities, places with incredibly strict, ironclad rules about premarital sex and traditional gender roles, surely they are immune to these demographic pressures.
You would think so, but they are not immune at all.
Really?
In fact, because their communities are so insular, they are some of the clearest, most undeniable examples of this math at work. Let's look at the Mormon community in Utah.
Okay.
Right now, there is a massive gender gap in the LDS Church. There are roughly 3 active women for every 2 active men.
But if they don't have the college gap driving it, what's causing that disparity?
It comes down to cultural expectations. There is intense pressure on young woman men to serve 2-year religious missions at age 18 or 19.
Oh, right, the missions.
And these missions are expensive, isolating, and highly demanding. Many young men, feeling unable or unwilling to meet that strict expectation, end up rebelling and dropping out of the church entirely.
Wow, okay.
This leaves a massive surplus of devout, practicing women behind, all competing for a shrinking pool of eligible, faithful men. And how does that pressure manifest? Because obviously they aren't adopting a casual hookup culture in the same way a secular college campus would.
Actually, the sources point out that the traditional norms do start to break down. You see a measurable rise in premarital sex, even within these communities.
I wouldn't have expected that.
But perhaps the wildest symptom of this hyper-competitive market is a massive boom in plastic surgery.
Plastic surgery in a conservative religious community.
Yes. Salt Lake City has 2.5 times the national average of plastic surgeons per capita.
You are kidding. 2.5 times.
When shared religious values are no longer enough to secure a partner because every other woman in your dating pool share those exact same values, the competition shifts to hyperphysical metrics.
That's incredible.
Women in the community are getting breast implants and Botox just to stand out to the few available men. It's a completely irrational, albeit extreme, market response.
That is fascinating. And the research mentioned a similar crisis in the Orthodox Jewish community, right?
Yes, they call it the Shidduch crisis. But the cause here isn't young men dropping out of the faith. It's a demographic quirk caused entirely by high birth rates and traditional age gaps, much like the baby boomer marriage squeeze we talked about earlier.
How high are the birth rates?
Orthodox families average 4.1 children. That means every new generation is about 4% larger than the one born just a year prior.
Which doesn't sound like a big deal until you factor in the marriage age. Walk me through the math there.
In this community, 22-year-old men traditionally marry 19-year-old women. So a 22-year-old man is reaching back into a younger demographic cohort to find a wife.
Okay.
Because the population is growing by 4% every single year, that 19-year-old female cohort is mathematically much larger than his 22-year-old male cohort. He is marrying into a market where he is incredibly scarce.
And the tragic symptoms of this are genuinely heartbreaking. The sources talked about these time thieves, young men who just delay and delay getting married.
Right, because why rush?
Exactly. Why commit to the 19-year-olds this year when they know a fresh, even larger crop of 19-year-old girls enters the market next year? The power dynamic gets so warped that you have stories of men demanding their teenage brides get breast reductions, so, quote, nobody else looks at her.
It's awful.
You have a terrifying spike in eating disorders and anorexia among young Orthodox women who are literally starving themselves to stay a size 6 because matchmakers tell them if they're a size 8, they are completely unmarketable.
It's a completely broken market.
And on the financial side, parents are paying $100,000 dowries just to secure a top rabbinical student for their daughter.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it proves that whether you are a secular, career-driven Manhattanite, a devout Mormon in Provo, or an Orthodox Jew in Brooklyn, the math eventually dictates human behavior. Values, religion, and culture are incredibly powerful forces, but demographics act like gravity.
Yeah.
Eventually, the market bends to the numbers.
That is honestly pretty bleak if you are a college-educated woman listening to this in a major city right now.
It sounds depressing, yeah.
If demographics act like gravity, is there any way to beat the game? Or are you just trapped by your local numbers?
Well, demographics are destiny, but your geography is a choice. You can beat the game through a concept called geographic arbitrage.
Okay, like in finance.
Exactly. In finance, arbitrage means taking advantage of a price difference between two different markets. You buy low in one place and sell high in another. In dating, it means packing up and moving your life to a market where your specific demographic is the rare, highly valued asset.
So moving somewhere with more men.
Right. This man deficit is highly localized, often driven by specific regional industries. For example, Silicon Valley, which locals jokingly call Man Jose, has 38% more single men than women because of the tech industry.
Man, Jose, that's hilarious.
And Aspen, Colorado has 22% more college-educated men because of the ski and outdoor industry.
The sources shared a story about a woman named Abby Evans that perfectly illustrates this.
Yes. Abby was living in New York, which has a massive surplus of college-educated women. She was dealing with a totally soul-crushing dating scene.
As many people do there.
Guys were constantly demanding open relationships. They wouldn't commit, or they were just ghosting her. Her self-esteem was tanking. So she decided to try geographic arbitrage.
She moved.
She moved to Aspen, Colorado for a fresh start, and she met her husband, the doctor, in 8 days.
8 days.
8 days, simply because she walked into a market where she was the scarce resource, and the men were mathematically incentivized to commit quickly.
Okay, but here is a paradox I noticed in the research that I couldn't wrap my head around. Why is it that the most attractive, highly successful 30-something women often seem to struggle the absolute most in these man-deficit cities?
It seems counterintuitive.
Right. You would think if anyone could beat the math, they'd have their pick.
Economists explain this using auction theory.
Hmm?
Think of the dating market like a high-end art auction. You have strong bidders, these highly attractive, successful women, and you have weak bidders. The strong bidders know they're an absolute catch, so they hold out. They are waiting for the perfect Van Gogh painting to come up for auction. They refuse to settle.
Makes sense.
But the weak bidders, knowing they might lose out in a competitive market, bid aggressively and lock down a good enough, reliable partner early on. By the time the strong bidders realize the Van Goghs are incredibly scarce, the market has already cleared out all the reliable, commitment-minded men.
Oh, wow. Add to that the math theory of the Carroll syndrome. I found this fascinating.
Oh, this is a great concept.
This is the scenario where a beautiful woman, let's call her Carol, is sitting alone in a coffee shop. Every guy in the shop sees her and thinks she is gorgeous, but every guy also assumes that every other guy is going to hit on her.
Right, they all do the math.
Exactly. They all run the numbers in their heads, and they mathematically deduce that their individual odds of rejection are simply too high to risk the embarrassment. So what happens? They all reject themselves, and nobody approaches Carol.
Exactly. And this brings us to the final, most effective strategy for women operating in a man-deficit market.
Which is?
The power of the ultimatum. In a market of absolute abundance, men have no logical economic reason to commit. They are incentivized to keep their options open. Therefore, women who issue ultimatums, who demand commitment and are genuinely willing to walk away if they don't get it, actually succeed because they introduce artificial scarcity into the equation.
It reminds me of Wayne Huizenga, the billionaire businessman. There's a famous story of him sitting in a boardroom negotiating a massive $4 million business acquisition.
Oh yeah, I know this one.
They got stuck on a tiny dispute about $100,000 in a bank account. Huizenga didn't argue. He just snapped his briefcase shut, stood up, and headed for the elevator.
And they caved.
Immediately. Why? Because they realized he was actually willing to walk away and kill the deal. Here's where it gets really interesting. Being the active pursuer and having the sheer confidence to pack up your briefcase and walk away if you don't get a commitment are statistically the strongest strategies for women in this market. You have to create the scarcity yourself.
Because if you don't create that boundary, the market will naturally default to the benefit of the majority holder, which, in the college-educated dating pool, is the men.
So let's recap this journey for you, because if you're listening to this and you're frustrated with your local dating app scene, this is the exact moment you need to look at your city's demographics. We have traveled from the Ivy League hookup culture to the polygynous mating habits of Bond Seachlids.
A very strange journey.
To say the least. We've unpacked the impulsive credit card debt loads of men in Georgia, the busy plastic surgeons of Utah, and finally, the actual game theory mathematics of flirting in a coffee shop. The overarching lesson here. Dating isn't just about romantic chemistry, and it's certainly not just a reflection of a society's decaying morals. It is largely a cold, hard game of supply and demand.
This raises an important question. In the stock market, there used to be a phenomenon known as the January effect.
The January effect.
Yeah, it was a highly predictable trend where stocks would universally bounce in price in January. Smart investors made a lot of money off it. But once behavioral economists published data about this pattern and publicized it to the world, the wider market of investors adapted.
Because everyone knew about it.
Right. And once they adapted, the anomaly completely self-destructed. The pattern vanished simply because people knew it was there.
Wow. So here's our final thought for you to mull over today. Now that the data behind the man deficit and the hookup culture is being exposed and publicized in books like Dataonomics, will the sheer awareness of this lopsided game cause it to self-destruct? If men and women finally understand the invisible demographic math that is pulling their strings, will they consciously change the way they play the game?
It's going to be interesting to watch.
Definitely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll see you next time.